The marriage entered the compound like a small festival, carrying rice bags, fake smiles, and the kind of excitement that fades once the wrappers are unboxed. The new daughter-in-law arrived with expensive perfume and a loud confidence that made neighbors peek through curtains. She liked being admired, and she treated respect like an old-fashioned rule meant for people without options. From the first week, the house felt different, like someone had opened a door and allowed heat to enter. The mother-in-law noticed it, but she only adjusted her headscarf and kept moving, as if patience could block prophecy. She had married into comfort, but she behaved like she bought the comfort with her own blood. The house was not a mansion, yet it was solid and respected, built slowly with sweat, prayer, and years of sacrifices nobody posted online. The mother-in-law had lived there long before the daughter-in-law learned how to curl her lashes. In that house, every corner held memory, every crack in the wall had a story, and every stool had carried pain. But the new woman saw only furniture. To her, the old woman was simply background, like an old calendar nobody bothered to remove. At first, the disrespect came dressed as humor, the kind that makes people laugh and then feel guilty later. She called the mother-in-law slow, joked about her hearing, mocked her coughing as if it was a comedy skit. She rolled her eyes when the old woman prayed, as though prayer was a poor person's hobby. When she served food, she served it with careless hands, like feeding a stray animal outside. She cleaned the sitting room with energy but ignored the old woman's small corner, making it clear which parts of the house deserved attention and which parts deserved neglect. The mother-in-law did not fight back, and that silence confused the daughter-in-law in a way she refused to admit. She expected shouting, drama, tears, something she could point at and call weakness. But the old woman's calm was steady, like a river that does not need permission to flow. She kept her eyes low and her voice softer than the daughter-in-law's footsteps. Yet something about her quiet presence felt like a wall. A wall you could insult all day, and it would still be standing when you got tired. Every day brought a new small conflict, and every small conflict carried hidden stakes. The daughter-in-law wanted control over the kitchen because control over food felt like control over power. She changed how soup was cooked and mocked the old woman's traditional methods, as if tradition was a disease. She rearranged cupboards, threw away old bowls, and replaced them with shiny ones that looked good but broke easily. The mother-in-law watched her history disappear in black nylon bags, yet she only pressed her lips together and continued washing plates, as if she was counting something invisible. Soon, the house began to feel like a stage where the daughter-in-law performed cruelty for herself. Even when nobody was watching, she still acted as if an audience was clapping. She would drag a chair loudly when the old woman was resting, slam doors for no reason, and increase the volume of her music when the mother-in-law tried to sleep. She treated the older woman's body like an inconvenience, as if age was a personal insult. And each time she did it, she felt taller inside, not knowing pride can grow until it blocks oxygen. The son, busy with work and tired of conflict, became a moving shadow in his own home. He saw enough to feel uneasy, but not enough to take full responsibility. He told himself the women would adjust, the way many men tell themselves trouble will solve itself if ignored. He wanted peace without paying for it. So he laughed when his wife made sharp jokes, and he looked away when his mother's eyes turned watery. His silence became another ingredient in the house, mixing with the daughter-in-law's arrogance to form something heavier than anger. The mother-in-law had a routine that felt like prayer. She woke early, swept the compound, watered small plants, and greeted the morning like an old friend. The daughter-in-law hated that routine because it made the old woman seem stable, and stability threatened her desire to dominate. One morning, the daughter-in-law poured dirty water across the swept floor, smiling as if she had done something brilliant. The old woman paused, stared at the mess, then quietly picked up her broom again. That calm response made the daughter-in-law's chest itch with irritation. She wanted the old woman to beg, to complain, to prove she could be broken. Instead, the mother-in-law moved like someone who had survived worse storms than dirty water. She cleaned the mess again without drama, and the sun rose higher, watching everything like an eye. The daughter-in-law laughed and left for the market, feeling victorious. Yet on that same day, a small thing happened that nobody could explain. Her phone screen began to flicker, not once, but repeatedly, like a nervous heartbeat. She blamed charging cables and shrugged, not realizing small warnings often come disguised as minor annoyances. As days turned into weeks, the disrespect deepened and became more private. In public, the daughter-in-law still smiled, still greeted elders with sweet voice, still used polite titles. But inside the house, she treated the mother-in-law like a burden she was forced to carry. She began to restrict the older woman's movement, not with locks, but with shame. She would complain loudly about the old woman's presence whenever visitors arrived, making it clear she wanted the house to look younger, lighter, more modern, as if old age was an ugly stain. One evening, a neighbor came to borrow something and found the mother-in-law sitting quietly outside, looking tired and smaller than usual. The daughter-in-law walked past her like she was invisible. The neighbor tried to greet the old woman, but the daughter-in-law answered instead, making it clear the elder did not deserve direct acknowledgement. The neighbor left with a strange look, the kind of look that carries rumor. The daughter-in-law did not care. She believed she controlled perception. She did not understand that community is like smoke. Once it enters your clothes, you can't pretend you smell like perfume. The first real misfortune arrived softly, like a thief who wears slippers. The daughter-in-law prepared food for an important family visit, hoping to impress and secure her position as the queen of the house. She cooked with pride, plated beautifully, and set everything like a small ceremony. Then, as she lifted the pot, the handle snapped. Hot soup spilled across her arm and the floor, burning her skin and ruining the meal. It was a quick accident, but it felt strangely deliberate, like the house itself had pushed back. She cried out in pain and anger, and for a moment the mother-in-law's eyes showed concern. The old woman rushed to help, searching for ointment, water, anything to reduce the burn. That kindness confused the daughter-in-law again. She expected the old woman to celebrate secretly, to enjoy the accident. But the mother-in-law moved with genuine care, as though compassion was her default setting. The daughter-in-law accepted the help, then later convinced herself the old woman had somehow caused the handle to snap. Blame felt easier than gratitude. After the burn, the daughter-in-law's sleep changed. She began waking at odd hours, sweaty and restless, with a feeling that something had entered her dreams and rearranged them. She started seeing the house in her mind as bigger than it was, with long corridors that did not exist and doors that opened into darkness. In the morning she laughed it off, telling herself it was stress. Yet the laughter sounded forced, like someone trying to convince a mirror. She began to drink more coffee, wear more makeup, and pretend fear could be covered like pimples. The mother-in-law noticed the changes without announcing them. She watched quietly, the way old people watch weather. She was not a weak woman, she was simply tired of fighting storms that never end. Some evenings, she sat by the window and stared out like she was listening to something beyond the compound walls. The daughter-in-law saw that gaze and felt irritated, as if the old woman was hiding secrets. She increased her cruelty, not because the old woman had done anything new, but because her own peace was slowly breaking and she needed someone to punish for it. Then came a night that did not end normally. Electricity went off, as it often did, but the darkness felt thicker than usual. The generator refused to start, no matter how many times the sun pulled it. The daughter-in-law's phone died even after charging earlier. The house became quiet in a way that felt unnatural, like the air was holding its breath. In that silence, the daughter-in-law heard small sounds, soft movements, faint scratches, yet when she checked, nothing was there. Her heart beat faster, and she hated herself for feeling afraid. She tried to distract herself by scrolling through social media, but her phone remained dead. She walked around, switched on and off, checked sockets, and cursed electricity. Yet the fear stayed, growing behind her ribs. The mother-in-law sat on her mat calmly, holding her rosary, breathing slowly, as though darkness was just another visitor. That calm made the daughter-in-law feel even more alone. She wanted to shout at the old woman for not being scared. She wanted to accuse her of something. But she swallowed her words because even arrogance has moments where it senses danger. The next morning, humor returned like a mask. The daughter-in-law joked about the generator being old, laughed at the power outage, and acted like nothing happened. She even teased the mother-in-law for liking darkness because she slept early. But the old woman did not respond. She simply took her broom and swept, as if sweeping could clean more than dust. The compound looked normal again. Birds chirped. Neighbors greeted. Yet the daughter-in-law carried a tight knot inside her chest, and she didn't know when that knot would pull. Soon, the misfortunes became patterns. Her favorite necklace snapped during a public outing and fell into gutter water. Her best wig began shedding hair in embarrassing clumps. Money kept leaving her hands quickly, like it had holes. Each time, she blamed someone. The tailor, the market woman, the bank app, the devil, jealousy, anything except herself. Meanwhile, the mother-in-law grew thinner, quieter, almost like a candle burning down without complaint. The daughter-in-law interpreted that weakness as victory, not realizing some candles burned down to light something else. A turning point arrived through something small and humiliating. On a busy morning, the daughter-in-law wore her newest outfit, stepped out feeling admired, and greeted neighbors with confidence. As she walked, the back seam of her dress tore loudly, exposing more than she intended. People laughed, not cruelly at first, but laughter grows teeth when it tastes blood. She rushed inside, shaking, face burning with shame. The mother-in-law saw her distress and offered a wrapper to cover her. That kindness again, like salt on a wound. The daughter-in-law accepted it, then later threw the wrapper aside like an insult. From that day, the daughter-in-law's body began to betray her in subtle ways. Headaches came often, heavy and stubborn. Her appetite changed. Her skin broke out in strange patches that refused to clear. Her energy dropped, and her laughter lost its shine. Still, she refused to soften. Instead, she became harsher, like a person squeezing a fragile thing too tightly. She began to talk about the mother-in-law as if she was the reason her life was failing. In her mind, the old woman's quietness became suspicious, as if silence itself was a weapon. One afternoon, she decided to prove her dominance in a final, humiliating way. She forced the mother-in-law to redo chores repeatedly, not because they were wrong, but because watching the older woman bend and strain gave her a twisted satisfaction. The mother-in-law's knees shook. Her breathing became rough. Yet she did not protest. She only moved, slower each time, like a tree struggling against strong wind. That day, something changed in the air. Even the sun noticed the heaviness, but he still said nothing. And silence, when repeated, becomes permission. Later that evening, the mother-in-law did something unexpected. She prepared a small meal and left it neatly for the daughter-in-law, even though she had been treated poorly all day. The food was simple but carefully arranged, like a quiet apology from someone who had nothing to apologize for. The daughter-in-law looked at it suspiciously, as if kindness was a trap. She ate anyway, because hunger does not respect pride. The taste was familiar, comforting, almost like childhood. For a moment, she felt softness. Then fear returned quickly, as if softness was forbidden. That night, she had a dream that shook her. In the dream, she was running through the compound, but the ground felt like mud, pulling her down. She tried to scream, but no sound came out. She saw the mother-in-law ahead, not running, just standing calmly with eyes that looked older than age. The daughter-in-law felt something on her neck, like a rope tightening, and she woke up gasping. Her throat hurt as if she had truly been choked. She sat up trembling, pretending it was only a dream, but her sweat told a different story. The next day, she noticed the mother-in-law was not in her usual spot. The broom stood untouched. The plants were dry. The older woman stayed in her room longer than normal. The daughter-in-law felt a strange relief, like silence after noise. But relief quickly turned into irritation because the house began to feel empty in a scary way. She walked past the mother-in-law's door and heard faint coughing. She hesitated, then kept walking. Her pride didn't allow her to care openly. Yet something inside her felt unsettled, as if the house was waiting. In the evening, the son returned and asked about his mother's absence. The daughter-in-law shrugged like it was nothing. But the son went to check and found the mother-in-law weak, sweating, struggling to sit up. The house shifted again. The daughter-in-law watched from a distance, feeling both annoyed and strangely afraid. She hated that the old woman's weakness attracted attention. She hated that sickness had the power to soften hearts. Yet the fear grew because deep down she sensed a rule she could not name: when you enter someone's spirit long enough, their pain may eventually start speaking back. The mother-in-law was taken to a clinic. The daughter-in-law dressed up and went along, not out of love, but to protect her image. In the clinic, she witnessed the old woman's frailty more clearly: thin wrists, tired eyes, breath that sounded like it carried stones. The daughter-in-law felt a brief flicker of guilt, then pushed it down quickly, like someone burying a dangerous object in sand. She told herself the old woman was dramatic. She told herself sickness happens. She told herself she had done nothing that deserved consequence. Yet her heart refused to agree. Back home that night, the compound felt quieter than it ever had. The daughter-in-law stood alone in the kitchen and noticed something odd. The air smelled like rain, yet the sky was clear. She heard a faint sound like whispering, but when she listened closely, it was only the ceiling fan struggling. She shook her head, laughed at herself, and forced confidence back onto her face. She went to the mirror and practiced her usual sharp smile. But the smile looked unfamiliar, like it belonged to someone else. Her reflection seemed tired, and fear hid behind her eyes like a thief in a dark room. But with a quiet shift that promised something worse. The daughter-in-law lay on her bed later, restless, listening to the house settle. Somewhere in the compound, a dog barked once, then went silent. The wind moved through leaves like fingers turning pages. In the darkness, she felt a strange certainty she could not explain. The disrespect she treated like entertainment had become a seed, and that seed had finally found water. She did not know what would grow, only that it would not ask her permission. The collapse started with small, embarrassing losses that seemed random until they formed a cruel pattern. The daughter-in-law woke up one morning and found her expensive shoes damaged, as if something had chewed them carefully, not hurriedly. She searched every corner for rats and found nothing. She replaced the shoes, then lost the new pair in a strange way, like the ground swallowed them between the bedroom and the gate. The house did not look haunted, it looked normal. That normality made it worse. It meant whatever was happening did not need drama to operate. Her pride tried to stand tall, but the days kept pushing it down. She began arriving late to important places for reasons that felt impossible to explain. A bus that never breaks down suddenly broke down. A neighbor who always greeted her warmly suddenly acted like she did not exist. A vendor accused her of unpaid debt she knew nothing about, and people believed the vendor without asking questions. The daughter-in-law felt her social power slipping like soap in wet hands. The more she tried to hold it, the faster it escaped, leaving her palms raw with frustration. She responded the way many people respond when life refuses to obey them. She tightened her anger and searched for an enemy. Her mind returned again and again to the mother-in-law, because blaming the old woman made everything simpler. It turned chaos into a story with a villain. She watched the mother-in-law's quiet movements like a detective searching for evidence, yet the old woman remained the same, slow, soft, and steady. That steadiness began to feel like insult. The daughter-in-law wanted tears and confession, but all she got was silence that felt older than time. The son tried to fix things in practical ways, the way people patch a leaking roof without checking why the house is sinking. He changed locks, repaired the generator, replaced broken items, and paid money to solve problems that returned like mosquitoes. Each solution lasted for a moment, then failed. The daughter-in-law started feeling hunted by ordinary life. Simple things like cooking, dressing, and walking outside became battles. She would reach for a pot and cut her finger. She would wear makeup and discover her face looked swollen. She would step outside confidently and return with dust on her clothes, as if the day rejected her. Her body, once her pride, became the loudest messenger of punishment. The strange rashes spread, not like a normal skin reaction, but like a map of invisible hands. Creams failed. Soap failed. Herbs failed. Her head began to pound at random moments, and the pain did not feel like sickness, it felt like pressure from inside, as if her thoughts were too heavy for her skull. She started losing hair in thin patches, and no wig could fully hide the damage. The mirror became a cruel friend, showing her a woman losing control while pretending she still had it. The house also began to change in ways that did not require supernatural tricks, only timing. Food spoiled faster than it should. Water in the bucket developed a strange smell overnight. A cockroach infestation appeared, then disappeared, then returned, as if the insects were taking orders. The daughter-in-law cleaned until her fingers hurt, yet the house stayed uncomfortable, like a guest who refuses to relax. She began hearing small sounds in the early hours, soft taps, faint drags, yet nothing moved when she checked. Each unanswered sound created a curiosity gap in her mind, and fear crawled into that gap and settled. People outside also shifted, and that shift brought a different kind of punishment. Neighbors started telling stories with half-smiles. Some stopped entering the compound. Some began greeting the mother-in-law with extra respect, as if trying to balance a spiritual scale. The daughter-in-law noticed that the older woman's presence now carried weight, and that weight made her feel smaller. Rumor moved through the street like harmattan dust, quietly coating everything. The daughter-in-law's name began to gather strange descriptions, not direct accusations, but careful phrases that implied she was a person whose shadow was heavy. Her money began to bleed. Not in dramatic losses, but in constant draining expenses that never ended. Clinic visits, tests, repairs, replacements, emergency payments, and sudden debts stacked like sandbags on her chest. She started selling small valuables to keep up, telling herself it was temporary. Then she sold bigger items, and still the pressure remained. It felt like a punishment designed for humiliation, not a sudden crash, but slow drowning in shallow water where everyone can watch. Each time she counted money, she felt the same shock, like someone stealing from her pocket while staring into her eyes. Then came the first truly public reversal, the kind that makes pride taste bitter for weeks. At a family gathering, she arrived dressed to impress, expecting admiration to refill her confidence. But before she could settle, a small incident exposed her, an unpaid matter, a false claim, a missing item, something that made people look at her differently. The issue did not destroy her life, but it punctured her image. She felt eyes measuring her, not praising her. She felt whispers forming behind smiles. She tried to laugh it off, but the laughter came out thin and shaky, like a cracked bell that cannot ring properly. When she returned home that day, she saw the mother-in-law sitting quietly, looking tired but peaceful. The contrast hit her like a slap. The daughter-in-law had chased power and was now trembling. The mother-in-law had accepted humiliation and was now calm. That calm began to feel like victory, and the daughter-in-law hated it. She wanted to confront the old woman, to force out a reaction, but even her anger felt weaker now. It is hard to roar when your chest is full of fear. So she stormed past, pretending strength, while her legs secretly felt unsteady. The next misfortune attacked her where she felt safest, her marriage. The son's patience thinned, not because he suddenly became brave, but because stress has a way of stripping people of denial. He began spending more time outside the house, returning later, speaking less, avoiding her eyes. It was not a dramatic breakup, but a slow emotional withdrawal. The daughter-in-law sensed it and panicked, because she had built her identity on control. She tried to reclaim him with extra effort, extra appearance, extra performance. But the more she performed, the more fake it felt, and fake things do not heal real cracks. One evening, as she rushed around the kitchen trying to prove value through service, she slipped and fell hard. The fall was not life-ending, yet it left her shocked by how quickly dignity can drop. For a long moment she lay there, staring at the ceiling, unable to move without pain. She expected someone to laugh, because she had laughed at weakness before. Instead, the mother-in-law struggled toward her, slow and stiff, and tried to help her up with trembling hands. That scene carried a quiet cruelty of its own, kindness offered to someone who had not deserved it. The daughter-in-law allowed herself to be helped, but the shame burned hotter than pain. She saw the older woman's thin arms and realized those arms had carried the son she married. Those arms had cooked, cleaned, prayed, and endured years of struggle. Yet she had treated them like useless sticks. That realization did not bring instant transformation, it brought confusion. Her mind wanted to resist, but her heart felt cornered. She sat on the edge of the bed later and stared at her bruised knee, sensing that the curse was not only taking things, it was forcing her to look at herself without filters. Her dreams grew sharper, more detailed, like warnings carved in her sleep. She began to see herself doing the same humiliating tasks she once forced on the old woman. She saw herself crawling for help and finding nobody. She saw herself calling out and hearing silence answer. She woke up breathless, heart racing, throat dry, and the fear followed her into daylight. The dreams felt too symbolic to be random. They had structure, like a story written by someone patient. She started dreading night, because night became a cinema where she was the main character in her own punishment. As her fear deepened, she tried new solutions, the desperate kind that people hide from the public. She began visiting places she once mocked. She listened to advice she would have laughed at months earlier. She spent money on rituals, on prayers, on protective items, on anything that promised relief. Yet nothing worked, because the root was not outside her. It was inside her history of disrespect. Every attempt felt like painting over mold without removing the dampness. For a day or two, she would feel lighter, then the heaviness returned, proving that shortcuts cannot rewrite a debt. The mother-in-law's health improved slightly, but her presence grew even quieter, as if she had moved beyond ordinary concerns. She ate little, spoke less, and spent long hours sitting in calm reflection. That calm now frightened the daughter-in-law more than any shouting could have. It felt like the old woman was no longer fighting for approval, she was simply existing, and existence itself was power. The daughter-in-law began to notice tiny details she once ignored, the older woman's careful hands, her disciplined routines, the way she never cursed back, the way she absorbed cruelty like sponge and still produced softness. Then the cycle turned with a cold fairness that made the lesson unavoidable. One afternoon, the daughter-in-law went out and returned to find the compound gate locked in a way that confused her. The key refused to cooperate. She shook it, tried again, and felt heat rising in her face as neighbors watched. She knocked, but help came slowly. For the first time, she stood outside her own home, humiliated, waiting, feeling powerless. The moment was simple and realistic, yet it hit her deeper than any spiritual story. She remembered how she once made the mother-in-law feel like a stranger in the same house. When she finally entered, she noticed the mother-in-law sitting close to the doorway, as if the older woman had been there all along, witnessing the reversal without celebrating it. The daughter-in-law's chest tightened. She wanted to apologize, but pride still fought inside her like a stubborn animal refusing to die. She walked to her room and sat alone, hands trembling slightly. She realized something terrifying, she was now living inside the consequences of her own personality. The curse was not only spiritual, it was social, emotional, physical. It was life reacting to cruelty the way skin reacts to poison. The breaking point came on a day that should have been ordinary. She woke up with a heavy feeling and tried to stand, but her legs felt weak. She moved slowly, body aching, head spinning slightly. She went to wash her face and saw her reflection, tired eyes, dull skin, hair thinning, confidence leaking. In that moment, the mask cracked. She remembered every small humiliation she had delivered like entertainment. She remembered the dirty water, the slammed doors, the careless serving, the public disrespect, the private cruelty. The memories did not come with dramatic music, they came calmly, like receipts laid on a table. She finally understood that curses do not always arrive through screams and thunder. Sometimes they arrive through symmetry. Sometimes life mirrors you until you are forced to recognize your own shape. The daughter-in-law felt regret, but regret is not a magic eraser. It is a light that shows damage clearly. She stumbled into the sitting room later and saw the mother-in-law resting, eyes half closed, breathing softly. The daughter-in-law stood there, unsure what to do, unsure if repair was still possible. The old woman's silence felt like a gate she could not force open. The ending did not give her the comfort of easy redemption. The curse completed its work in a way that was both quiet and final. Her reputation remained stained, her marriage remained strained, her body remained scarred by months of stress and sickness. Some things improved slowly, but some losses stayed permanent, because consequences teach best when they leave marks. The daughter-in-law learned to move gently, to speak less, to treat people with care. Not because she wanted applause, but because she feared the weight of disrespect. In the last image, the house felt calmer, yet she knew calm was borrowed, not owned.